Back when I was navigating the tumultuous waves of high school, during those formative freshman and sophomore years, the yellow school bus was my chariot. It picked me up each morning at the corner of our tree-lined suburban street, delivering me back each afternoon. My high school, a standard, unremarkable building nestled about 10 minutes from home, was large enough to get lost in but small enough to feel familiar. With somewhere around 600 students milling about, it echoed with the buzz of adolescent energy and the occasional slammed locker. It was a day like any other during my sophomore year. Classes were winding down, and the anticipation of the final bell was palpable in the air. I lingered in the bustling hallway near my locker after my penultimate class, surrounded by the familiar faces of my friends. Our group was a tight-knit band of guys, the kind you could count on for a good laugh, or to have your back when it counted. As we swapped stories and joked about the day's happenings, the first warning bell cut through our chatter, signaling the 2-minute countdown to our next class. While the crowd began to thin, a few of us, anchored in our conversation, made no immediate move to leave. The classroom I needed wasn't far, just a quick walk down the hall. Among us was Marcos, a junior whose younger brother, Rory, was part of our crew. That connection kept him lingering with us sophomores more often than not. Our laughter was abruptly sliced by another chime over the intercom. Only it wasn't the familiar toll signaling the start of class. Confusion rippled through the air, replaced quickly by tension as the intercom crackled to life with an urgent announcement. The school was going into lockdown. We were instructed to proceed immediately to our next class, where teachers would lock the doors and douse the lights. Despite the gravity of the directive, a rebellious murmur ran through the remaining students. I overheard one of my friends mutter about leaving, his voice tinged with a mix of fear and defiance. Near us, one of the exit doors beckoned, already drawing a small exodus of students who decided they'd rather face the unknown than remain confined within classroom walls. In that moment, a chaotic impulse seized me, too. There was only one class period left in the day. The pull to escape was magnetic. As Marcos prepared to leave, he threw an offer over his shoulder to anyone willing to join him for a ride home. The decision split our group down the middle, half veered towards their respective classrooms. The rest, swept up in the tide of students heading for the exits, chose freedom. With teachers emerging into the halls, herding students with increasing urgency, the window to leave was closing fast. I hesitated just long enough to lose sight of Marcos and the others who had darted for the door. Caught in indecision, I finally made my move, dodging a teacher's grasp and bolting outside. Once out in the fresh air, the scene was one of utter pandemonium. Students scattered in every direction. Some sprinted towards the parking lots, others towards the surrounding neighborhood or the fields and woods behind the school. The sense of order and structure that usually defined our campus had evaporated into pure chaos. I raced towards the main parking lot, hoping to catch up with Marcos and the others. But by the time I arrived, panting and scanning the sea of cars, there was no sign of them. Desperation clawed at me as I sprinted to the smaller lot behind the tennis courts, only to be met with the same scene. A few abandoned vehicles, but no friends in sight. Realizing I was left behind, I was gripped by a sudden, isolating fear. Going back to the school wasn't an option. It was probably locked down tight by now. My house was too far to walk without a car, and I had none. My steps were aimless as I wandered back towards the school, the weight of my situation settling in. But then, a back door that was usually an afterthought in my daily routine caught my attention. I tried it, hoping for an unlikely entrance, but it was securely locked. Turning to plan my next move, my heart froze. A man emerged from another back entrance of the school. He was too old to be a student, his movements too hurried and suspicious for a staff member. Instinctively, I ducked behind a nearby tree, watching as he glanced over his shoulder. Not just leaving, but fleeing. My breath held. I darted for the woods, hoping the trees would offer some semblance of safety. As I plunged into the underbrush, the sounds of the school faded, replaced by the pounding of my own heart and the distant noise of the city. It was clear now. This wasn't just a drill or a minor incident. The stakes were real and suddenly very personal. Crouched in the dense underbrush of the woods, I felt a mix of adrenaline and fear surging through me. Each leaf rustle seemed amplified, each shadow a potential threat. The man's appearance had shifted everything from a mere escape to a palpable danger, and as I hid, trying to quiet my heavy breathing, I realized I had inadvertently stumbled into the core of today's chaos. Minutes stretched like hours, my ears straining for any sound that might indicate the man's proximity. The quiet was eventually broken by the crunch of footsteps on the dry leaves just outside the woods. My heart raced. I was not alone. Driven by a mix of fear and survival instinct, I no longer cared about getting caught. I just knew I needed to move. Pushing through the undergrowth, I broke into a run, darting deeper into the woods, away from the sound of the approaching steps. The trees blurred past as I ran, their branches snagging at my clothes and skin. The thought that this man could be pursuing me because he saw me as a witness, or worse, a target, propelled me forward. I couldn't risk looking back, focusing only on the uneven ground ahead to avoid tripping. After what felt like an eternity but was likely only a few minutes, I emerged on the other side of the woods, near a familiar street that ran parallel to our school. Out of the woods but still not safe, I made my way to the sidewalk, trying to blend in with the normalcy of the outside world. My mind raced as I walked briskly towards the nearest place of refuge I could think of, a gas station a few blocks away. The normal sounds of traffic and city life felt surreal, a stark contrast to the fear and isolation of the woods I had just left behind. Reaching the gas station, I hurried inside, my appearance disheveled and my demeanor likely betraying the fear I felt. The clerk behind the counter eyed me with a mix of concern and curiosity as I approached, out of breath and anxious. "Excuse me, can I use your phone?" I managed to ask, my voice unsteady. "It's an emergency. My school, there's a lockdown." The clerk nodded, handing me the store phone without hesitation. I dialed my mom's number from memory, each ring amplifying my anxiety until her familiar voice filled my ear. "Mom, I'm okay, but I need you to pick me up at the gas station on Main Street," I explained quickly, my words tumbling out. "Something happened at school, and I had to leave." It's a long story." Relief washed over me as she assured me she'd be there as soon as possible. While I waited, the clerk offered me a place to sit and a bottle of water, his earlier suspicion replaced by a sympathetic concern. As I sat, trying to calm my shaking hands, I replayed the events that had led me here. The decision to leave school, the chaotic rush from the building, the encounter with the man. Each moment seemed both vivid and unreal. The reality of what could have happened if I hadn't run, if the man had followed me deeper into the woods, sent shivers down my spine. Finally, the familiar sight of my mom's car pulling into the gas station brought me back to the moment. She rushed in, her expression a mix of worry and relief, and enveloped me in a tight hug. "Are you okay? Did anyone hurt you?" she asked, her eyes scanning me for any sign of physical harm.
"Ah, infine, Mom."
"Just scared," I admitted. allowing myself to relax for the first time since the lockdown was announced. We didn't linger at the gas station. As we drove away, I saw my school in the rearview mirror, a silent and stark reminder of the day's events. My mom listened as I recounted everything, her expressions ranging from shock to relief that I was safe. As we approached our home, the familiar sights of our neighborhood felt strangely comforting, a safe haven from the chaos of the day. Yet, as we pulled into our driveway, the weight of the day's events still hung heavily on me, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away, leaving behind a deep, unsettling feeling of vulnerability. Once home, I collapsed onto our living room couch, the fabric feeling unusually comforting against my skin. My mom, ever the caretaker, busied herself in the kitchen, no doubt preparing something to eat despite my protests that I wasn't hungry. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the tumult of the day, and as I lay there, my mind replayed the day's events in a relentless loop. As the evening wore on, the initial shock of the escape and chase began to fade, replaced by a creeping realization of just how dangerous the situation could have been. It wasn't just the fear of being caught outside during a lockdown. It was the unknown intentions of the man I had seen, the real threat that had put our entire school on edge. My phone buzzed intermittently with messages from friends checking in, sharing snippets of information and rumors that had already begun to circulate about the lockdown. I learned that the police had arrived shortly after I left, that the school had been secured, and that no one had been hurt. Relief washed over me, but it was tinged with the residue of fear. Later that evening, my father came home, his expression tense until he saw me and relief replaced his worry. We sat down as a family, and I shared the entire story. My parents listened, their faces a mixture of horror and gratitude. Horror at what could have happened, and gratitude that I was safe, sitting with them. It was a man trying to see his daughter, I finally told them, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place as more details had come out from friends' texts and local news updates. He was drunk and got aggressive when the custodian tried to stop him. That's why they locked down the school. My mom shook her head, her eyes saddened by the thought of what the man's daughter must have felt, and my dad discussed the legal implications, his voice low and serious. The conversation shifted from what had happened to how it was handled and what measures could be taken to prevent such incidents in the future. It was a lot for all of us to process, and as the discussion wound down, I felt emotionally and physically drained. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the darkness seeming to press in around me. The image of the man at the school, the sound of footsteps behind me in the woods, and the rush of relief at reaching the gas station played over in my mind. It was more than just a close call. It was a vivid reminder of the fragility of safety, the quick turn from everyday normalcy to chaos. The next day at school felt surreal. As I walked through the same hallways, now quiet and orderly, it was hard to reconcile the normalcy with the fear that had gripped us all the day before. Teachers and students alike moved with a heightened sense of awareness, conversations low and serious. In my first class, the teacher addressed the incident, reassuring us of the safety protocols and the swift response that had ensured no one was harmed. Throughout the day, I found myself glancing at the exits, the back doors, and the woods beyond the school grounds. Each offered both a reminder of escape and a symbol of potential danger. Friends recounted their own experiences from the lockdown, each story weaving a tapestry of collective anxiety and relief. In the days that followed, the incident spurred changes at the school. Security measures were reviewed and enhanced, and there were increased discussions about how to handle not just the physical safety of students, but also our emotional and psychological well-being. As for me, I learned a lot about myself that day. I discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed, a capacity to act under pressure. But more importantly, I was reminded of the value of community, the importance of looking out for each other, and the undeniable strength that comes from facing fears together. Reflecting on those tumultuous hours, I realized that while I had physically run from a perceived threat, I had also run towards a deeper understanding of my own instincts, of courage, and ultimately, of the profound impact such experiences have on shaping who we become. As life returned to its usual rhythm, those lessons remained, indelible marks of a day that had started as ordinary and ended as anything but. This was an event from 2 years ago, yet it feels as vivid as if it happened yesterday. The incident unfolds towards the close of a typical school day, with the bells signaling the shift to our final class period. My destination should have been history class, a subject that I struggled with and had little enthusiasm for, especially given my strained relationship with the teacher. On that particular day, my motivation had plummeted to new depths, compelling me to skip class and seek refuge in a rarely frequented bathroom at the school's far end. Ensconced in the most secluded stall, I was absorbed in a game on my phone, the outside world momentarily forgotten. That is, until the piercing blare of the principal's voice over the intercom shattered my tranquility. A lockdown announcement boomed through the speakers, which I dismissed as just another drill and continued my digital escapade. Suddenly, an eerie silence enveloped the space as the lights and the distant hum of the air conditioning died simultaneously, a stark indication that the power was out. This was no ordinary drill. My heart began to race as darkness enveloped the bathroom, transforming it into a pitch-black cavern. Concern morphing into fear, I texted a friend to glean some insight into the situation. His immediate response sent chills down my spine. "Dude, where are you? It's a real lockdown. Everyone's asking about you." Admitting my location, he urged me to find a better hiding place. But where? The thought of venturing into the dimly lit, possibly dangerous hallways was out of the question. Resigned, I dimmed my phone's brightness and stayed put, my heart pounding against the cold metal of the stall. After what seemed an interminable wait filled with anxiety, my friend's text illuminated my screen with chilling news. There was an armed student menacingly banging on classroom doors. Fear gripped me tighter as I realized the proximity of my own classroom to my current hideout. I switched off my phone to listen intently. Footsteps thundered down the hallway, growing louder, until the sound of the bathroom door creaking open struck terror in my heart. Frozen in place, I listened as the intruder entered the stall next to mine. The silence that followed was suffocating. Gathering every shred of courage, I whispered, "Who's in here?" A brief silence preceded a timid response, "I'm just looking for a place to hide." Heard about the lockdown over the speakers. Though the voice sounded like that of a fellow student, uncertainty lingered. We sat in silence, each minute stretching endlessly until another announcement pierced the stillness, instructing everyone to evacuate the school orderly and head towards the front entrance where police awaited. I hesitated before leaving the stall, only to find that my temporary neighbor showed no signs of moving. "You coming?" I asked. The reply was hesitant. Yeah man, just give me a couple minutes." Puzzled yet anxious, I didn't wait and hurried towards the exit. As I navigated the dimly lit corridors towards safety, my phone buzzed. The message from my friend was horrifying. A young man, slightly older than us, had attempted to rob a nearby gas station at knife point, stabbing several people in the process. Failing to get any money, he had fled to our school, trying to blend in with the students. The final sentence in the text halted me in my tracks. The cops say he's still inside, probably hiding in the back of the school. Fear transformed my brisk walk into a frantic sprint. Bursting through the front doors, I relayed my ordeal to a police officer. A subsequent search of the bathroom revealed it empty, save for a broken window, an escape route for the assailant. In the days that followed, I was unwillingly thrust into the spotlight, a reluctant figure of curiosity and sympathy. The fact that I had unknowingly shared a hiding place with the very threat I sought to avoid haunted me. To this day, the perpetrator remains at large, a constant shadow over my thoughts. In the wake of the lockdown, the atmosphere at school was markedly different. Hallways that once buzzed with the carefree laughter and chatter of students now echoed with hushed tones and anxious whispers. Security measures were visibly tightened, with additional police patrols and random locker searches becoming the new norm. I found myself thrust into an unwelcome spotlight, the student who had unwittingly shared a hideout with a criminal. Curious glances and whispered conversations followed me like shadows, each whisper a reminder of that fateful day. My parents, deeply shaken by the event, were a mix of relief that I was safe and fear of what might have been. Home became a sanctuary and a prison all at once, as they imposed stricter curfews and monitored my activities more closely than ever before. My phone, once a portal to friends and games, now seemed like a beacon of bad news, constantly reminding me of the ongoing search for the assailant. As days turned into weeks, the initial shock faded into a persistent unease. I tried to lose myself in schoolwork, in coding projects that had once captured my imagination, but my focus was fleeting. Images of the dimly lit bathroom, the sound of footsteps approaching the stall next to mine, and the chilling text from my friend replayed in my mind, disrupting my concentration and sleep. The community's response was a complex tapestry of support and suspicion. Local newspapers and TV stations covered the story extensively, each report bringing a new wave of attention. My classmates, while supportive, often asked probing questions I wasn't ready to answer. What did you hear in there? Were you scared? Their curiosity was natural, but it stung, reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. Counselors were brought into the school, offering sessions for anyone who needed to talk. Initially resistant, I eventually found myself sitting across from Miss Harper, a gentle woman with a knack for making students feel heard. It was in those sessions that I began to process the ordeal, understanding that my feelings of fear and betrayal were normal, even expected. Ms. Harper helped me see that healing was not just about moving on, but accepting that what happened was part of my story, not the entirety of it. As the school year progressed, the incident became a less frequent topic of conversation. The police confirmed that the assailant had fled the state, and while this offered some relief, it didn't erase the lingering fear. Life at school gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the scars remained, invisible but indelible. As a high school history teacher, my days are typically structured around a predictable schedule of classes, grading, and lesson planning. It's a routine that brings a comfortable rhythm to my life. That particular day started just like any other. I had just finished my second period class and was looking forward to my free period, what we in the department call our planning hour. It's a time most of us used to catch up on work or just take a breather. After the bell rang to signal the end of the class, I gathered my things and made my way to the teacher's lounge. It's a small comfort zone where we can relax without the bustling energy of students around. The lounge is modestly equipped, a few couches, a table, some chairs, a fridge, and a TV. It's a little sanctuary where I usually enjoy a quick cup of coffee before diving back into the world of historical events and student assessments. The lounge is strategically placed between two hallways, making it a bit of an oddity with its two windows that look out onto the corridors. We keep the curtains drawn for privacy, creating a cozy, secluded feel inside. I remember feeling particularly relaxed as I brewed my coffee, enjoying the peace of the empty room, a rarity in the often hectic school environment. As the coffee dripped slowly in the background, I mulled over the assignments I would need to grade and the upcoming lessons I planned to tweak. That's when the calm of the morning was shattered by a sudden announcement over the school's PA system. A lockdown was in effect immediately. I froze for a moment, the familiar chime of the machine in the background now a distant sound. In all my years at the school, we had never had a real lockdown, only drills. The unexpected nature of this announcement sent a chill down my spine. My first instinct was to ensure that any students caught in the hallways could find safety. I moved swiftly to the lounge door, peering out into the hallway, expecting to see a flurry of activity. But it was eerily quiet. No one was in sight. Concerned but uncertain, I retreated back into the lounge, my mind racing with possibilities. Why would we be in a lockdown? The day had been as normal as any other, with no prior indication that something was amiss. I decided to head back to my classroom, thinking it would be safer and that I could gather more information from there. However, as I reached for the lounge door to leave, my plan was abruptly interrupted. Through the hallway window, I caught sight of a figure, a man, not a student and definitely not a teacher from his appearance. He looked to be in his mid to late 20s, dressed in plain clothes, walking with a purposeful stride towards the lounge. My instincts screamed that something was wrong. He had no reason to be in this part of the school, especially during a lockdown. Quickly, I drew back and locked the lounge door, my heart pounding as I processed the situation. Moments later, there was a tentative knock. Then, a voice, unfamiliar and demanding, broke the silence. "Let me in." The tone was not one of seeking refuge, but commanding entry. Torn between responding and protecting myself, I hesitated, then decided to reach out to the principal via my phone for guidance and to confirm the identity of this unexpected visitor. No answer came. The lines were likely jammed with others seeking information or reporting the situation. The man outside didn't relent. His knocks grew more insistent, his requests louder. I was on edge, not knowing his intentions and uncomfortable with the escalating situation. When I attempted to call the principal again, the tension was suddenly amplified by the sound of shattering glass. Turning towards the noise, my worst fears were realized as I saw the curtain fluttering from the force of an object being hurled through the window. The man was trying to force his way in. Panic set in, and survival instincts took over. I couldn't let this confrontation escalate further. As the glass broke away completely and the figure began to climb through, I seized the moment to make my escape. I dashed out of the lounge, my only thought to put as much distance between myself and the intruder as possible. My feet carried me quickly down the corridor, my familiarity with the school layout guiding me back to the safety of my classroom. Once inside, I locked the door, my breath ragged, my mind reeling from the encounter. Safely back in my classroom, I finally managed to contact the police through my cell phone, reporting the situation as calmly as I could manage. They were already aware and had officers en route. Ensconced in my familiar surroundings, I waited out the lockdown, the minutes stretching into eternity until the announcement came that it was lifted. The aftermath was a blur. The police apprehended the intruder in the lounge where he had remained, confused and likely under the influence According to later reports, the school was secured, and students were released to their anxious parents. As I reflect on that day, the normalcy of it all before the incident strikes me the most. It was a day like any other. A simple coffee break turned into a moment of fear and action. It reminded me of the fragility of our daily routines and the ever-present need for awareness and preparedness. In the end, I was grateful for the safety procedures in place and the swift response of law enforcement, but it was a clear reminder that safety is something we must continuously work to ensure, even in the most familiar of settings. The lockdown had ended, and the school slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the atmosphere was unmistakably changed. As I sat in my now quiet classroom, the adrenaline slowly receded, replaced by a cascade of thoughts and emotions. The realization of what could have happened had I not reacted as I did was sobering. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues and my principal, checking in to ensure I was safe and to share brief updates on the situation. The intruder had been subdued and taken into police custody without further incident. He was indeed under the influence of drugs and had no clear connection to the school. His intentions, while still unclear, pointed to confusion and poor judgment rather than a targeted threat.